Well, as we've heard this morning, the UK's inflation rate has fallen again to 6.8% for July. So prices still going up, just not as quickly. Is there light at the end of the tunnel for our economy, like Rishi Sunak said?
Well, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury is John Glen, and he joins us now live from Westminster. Good morning to you, Mr Glen.
Good morning.
Obviously, you'll be pleased at this slightly just over 1% drop in inflation, but I want to come straight to the chase here. Rishi Sunak, one of his pledges is to halve inflation, but he's never said what the target figure is. We don't know because he won't say. So let's ask you, you must have it in mind. When he made that pledge, inflation was running at 10.7. So is halving inflation, and therefore is his promised target 5.35%? Is that what we're looking at?
Well, it's around 5%, 5.5%, but what we want to do is make sure that we get the inflation down to the long-term target of 2%. We welcome today's progress in that regard, and the Bank of England now thinks that we will get to 5% by the end of this year, 3% by this time next year, and then be on track for 2% the following year. So it is welcome progress, but we're not complacent at all. It takes a lot of hard work to make sure that we manage public spending. And obviously, we work very closely with the Bank of England, who determine our interest rates.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that, because obviously the main weapon against inflation, and to bring it down, is setting the rates, which the Bank of England does.
Yes.
And they've done that since, what is it, 1998?
97,
when Gordon Brown gave them the power. He surrendered the government's power to set interest rates, and he gave it to the Bank of England. And there's been a lot of debate about that ever since. Do you think that was the right thing to do? Would you rather have the power back in number 10?
I don't think now is the time to be discussing a change in the independence of the monetary policy setting.
Oh, I think it is. I'd just like you to answer the question. Would you like government to have power back? You know, not today, but in the future.
I think we have reached a settled state, and the situation is as it is, and I see no conversations across government about that changing anytime soon. We respect the Bank of England's discretion in this matter, and obviously they've got some difficult decisions to make, and they will make their next determination, I think, on the 21st of September.
So you think they know what they're doing?
They will make the decisions based on lots of different data points. We work closely with them, but they are independent of government. I don't offer commentary on the Bank of England's process. I recognise it's a very difficult job to make those decisions with so many data points. There isn't a single linear path that we're going to go down on this, and there are lots of factors that make up those figures month by month.
Indeed. I mean, you said at the beginning there that it's going to take some good government management to hit that target. Does that mean then that it was bad government management that led to the rise and the huge increases we've seen in the first place?
And what it means is that when you have high inflation, but you've set government budgets department by department for 3 years, and you've got inflationary pressures, that government ministers naturally find that very challenging to deliver the commitments they've made on services that they're delivering for the country to those budgets. So it means actually managing those budgets very tightly, reprioritising, doing things more efficiently, spending money more effectively, so that you don't actually add more borrowing to the challenges that we face.
But you can see what I'm saying, though. You're saying we need to do things more efficiently and more effectively. You have been in power for 13 years.
Yeah.
Why was that not happening before?
Forgive me, when we won the election, we didn't expect to have to close down the economy 3 months later.
Quite.
And then subsequently spend 94 billion to help people with their energy bills, consequential of what Putin did in Ukraine. Those are the facts around how this government had to respond to events beyond our control. And we are getting to grips with the inflationary pressures that were unleashed consequential of that massive impact on our energy prices.
All right, in the meantime, we've got to manage prices, haven't we, which are crucifying so many people. The Liberal leader, Ed Davey, I'm sure you know, this morning, has called for an indefinite freeze on rail fares. Now, the current freeze on rail fares evaporates in a few months' time. What's your thinking on that? Are you up for that?
Well, we've said that we won't be increasing rail prices of fares beyond inflation, and my colleague Mark Harper will make the announcements in due course. But, you know, I wish I could relieve every single pressure in every household up and down this country. That is not realistic. You know, we've got to deal with the reality of the budget situation that we have. We have supported households to the tune of, on average, £3,300 per year for this year and last year, and that is a significant investment, and we've got to pay for the costs of that in terms of the borrowing costs. But what we've got,
sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but just on that, you know, you aren't going to use the RPI, are you, to decide those increased fares? So what are you going to use to determine the prices? Because sometimes for travellers and those who rely on those services, it can feel rather arbitrary.
Well, as I said, Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, will set out what's going to happen with fares, but we've said that they won't rise higher than inflation, and we won't see those rises till spring next year. But he will make the determination, and obviously as Chief Secretary, I work very closely with him to look at the choices he's going to make across those budgets, as I was talking to earlier.
Let's look at food prices. They're going up so quickly, and of course inflation, we talk about the average figures here. Inflation is a jagged edge, and the peak of that edge currently is food prices. They're really rocketing up, to the extent that a recent survey showed that the majority of people living in the United Kingdom are now eating less and buying less food. They simply can't afford what they could eat 2 years ago. Any thoughts about freezing food prices?
Well, it's not. Government won't be able to freeze food prices. What we can do is work closely with the supermarkets to look at the pressures on their budgets, to look at their energy costs, to look at what we can do with regulations and across their supply chains. And indeed, the Chancellor, my boss, has met with supermarket heads just a few months ago to look at that. We can talk about transparency of pricing in the retail sector. We'll be doing that with petrol prices, working with the industry and regulators. We see today that the food component of inflation has gone down significantly, and it's due to halve by the end of this year. But we wouldn't be able to help in the way that you suggested. But what we have done is help households, as I say, with those significant support for their energy prices, which is obviously something that was unexpected and doubled and tripled in many cases.
And the other bit of that jagged edge, as Richard put it, in terms of being high food prices, is also mortgage payments, of course, and the knock-on effect from that on those that rent.
Yes.
Now, Liberal Democrats and other parties are suggesting a targeted mortgage support scheme that would help those most at risk of losing their home.
Yeah.
What do you say to that, and have you considered it?
We always look at all the options. What we did is we had the lenders in. We had 7 firms that signed up initially. We've now got 90% of mortgage lenders signed up to the mortgage charter.
So that was back in May. I was going to ask you about that, actually, and I know you're busy, so I want to jump in. What's happened? What's come of that in actual reality since May?
Well, what's happened is that mortgage people who are about to switch mortgages have got options to go to interest only, to move to other products in advance, and have got assurances around the FCA's support in their dealings with their lenders. But you asked me about the proposal to offer more support that one of our political opponents has raised. What they don't say is how you can afford that. And of course, this is the challenge. In government, you've got to make the numbers add up, because if you don't make the numbers add up, you have to borrow more, you have to tax more. And I think we're taxing quite enough. And what we've got to do in order to get inflation down is to have discipline in public spending. What we've done with that mortgage charter has been quite significant, the fact that we've got so many lenders involved, and it will help many mortgage holders as they come off to new mortgage
All right,
products.
Chief Secretary to the Treasury, John Glen, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
We were speaking, I have to say, to a financial expert this morning who said that whenever inflation goes above 10%, which of course it did, it takes years to get it down to 2%. So we may be doing this interview repeatedly.